Chance to look at the last meeting's minutes.
Jerry, make a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, perfect. Motion's approved. We'll go down to the chair's report. So, I'll start off with the combined Long Island Railroad Tender Council PCAC June report. Okay, the New York State Legislature and Governor's Office has worked with the MTA to provide adequate funding so that we are no longer in jeopardy of falling off the infamous financial cliff, and not just for this budget, but for the next few years. Part of the financial plan is the restoration of biannual fare increases. Fare hearings will be scheduled to begin later this month and will probably be voted on in July. These increases will most likely take effect in September. Due to generous package received from New York State, this year's increase will only be 4% instead of the originally proposed 5.5%. It should be noted that a couple of discounted programs, the 20-trip commutation ticket and Atlantic ticket, are in jeopardy of being lost. I was going to recommend that we keep both these, the PCAC fight to keep both these in place. There is a question regarding the 20-trip commutation ticket, so I would withdraw that at this time. We'll also hear more about the fare review and what the office undertook to help inform us on our recommendations. And that will be later in the agenda. Another part of the long-range financial plan is congestion pricing, which has recently gotten over a few hurdles, but it's still over a year away from being implemented. This program will become a major contributor to the capital plan once in place. We anticipate the final FONSI in mid to late June. The MTA has announced the results of the Blue Ribbon Fare Evasion Panel, and we look forward to seeing the recommendations being put into place. Fare evasion cost the MTA hundreds of millions of dollars in lost revenue. I believe Lisa got copies for most of the PCAC members.
It's available online also.
Okay, it's available online, but...
And we'll hear more about it.
Alrighty, and we'll hear more about that later. Okay, after much encouragement from the PCAC, the MTA has adopted a policy regarding the use of PEVs within our transit system. We now look forward to a robust informational campaign to advise our ridership about the formalized rules and regulations. Regarding the Long Island Railroad, riders continue to express their displeasure with the schedule and some crowding to and from Penn Station since the implementation of Grand Central Madison service. While there are only the typical adjustments made for the summer schedule, which just took effect, we are strongly encouraging the Long Island Railroad to make some major changes come this fall. First and foremost among these being the restoration of timed connections in Jamaica. In order to assist us in making proper recommendations regarding the Long Island Railroad schedule, we have taken a survey of ridership. Carol will tell you more about the process and when we plan to release the results later in today's meeting. Another concern regarding the Long Island Railroad is the fact that the MTA has yet to release the contract for the new M9A procurement. There are only about 3 dozen or so M9s yet to be delivered from the original order, yet we're still seeing approximately 100 M3s, which are at the limit of their useful lives in service. And closing on a positive note, the Long Island Railroad Commuter Council has finally established a satellite office in Mineola, where we held our April and May council meetings.
You're a little bit closer.
So, any questions from anybody, or?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
What is the difference between an M9 and an M9A car?
It's very minor.
I mean,
It's basically the M9.
second batch that's been...
It's a second batch. There may be some refinements, but they're pretty much the same car.
Just the front is different, the color. That's what the blueprint's showing.
All right, well, like I said, it's very minor. Yes, ma'am.
It's Karen. When you talk about the Atlantic ticket being in jeopardy of being gone, what iteration of it? Is it a weekly one? Is it the daily one?
It's the weekly one. It's the weekly one with the transfer, right? With the free transfer.
I mean, this, I don't want to,
No, go ahead.
this was going to be part of my report, but there is talk of merging it into city ticket so that people aren't confused, because it is a lower fare and it is on Brooklyn Ranch, but there is the possibility of the loss of the weekly free subway bus transfer, and we are opposed to that law.
Yeah.
Do you have any updates on station improvements, accessibility at Walton and Locust Manor?
We can get that. We don't have it at this time, but we can get that for you. If you just send Lisa an email, and then we can follow up with, Hector Garcia at LIRR. Anybody else? Hearing none, we'll go to Andrew.
Okay, to be brief, ridership continues to really be wonderful, and there have been multiple days now with in excess of 4 million subway riders, which is fabulous. And weekends are, if you've ridden at all on weekends, it's packed. Lots of tourists are back, which is a great sign. There are so many geos weekends, so not only tourists, but New Yorkers really don't know in some cases what's happening. Memorial Day weekend was like you needed a scorecard to keep up with all the things that were going on that weekend. It was incredible. Fortunately, a lot of it is up on the out front advertising screens. There are apps that will now show you what's happening, so you have to keep track of it, but it's great that ridership is up. Service increases are coming beginning in July. I gave the whole list last time, so I'm not going to go through that again, but basically it's weekday, off-peak, evening, and weekend service is getting improved on many lines, down to the between 6 and 8 minute frequencies from 12 and sometimes 20-minute frequencies. So that's really good news too. That's happening at different times during the year. There's some happening in July. There's another time in August and one in December. But by December, all of these will be in place. You've all heard that fare increases are likely to come around Labor Day or thereabouts. Basically, it's a 4 or 5% increase. The more you buy, the better the deal, and we'd like to continue to see them rewarding their best customers. So that makes perfect sense. As we just discussed with Aaron, there are some good and bad in this fare increases. The bad would be the possible loss of the weekly option with free subway and bus transfer for Atlantic ticket, which is obviously Southeast Queens through Jamaica and all the way out to into Atlantic Terminal. We will see how that breaks out. The reduced fare will definitely be kept, the regular fare, and there will be peak fares now. So City Ticket will actually be available in rush hours, which is an improvement. It wasn't before. It will be like, instead of the 5, it will be 7, but at least it will be reduced from what the regular fare would have been. So that's a good sign. Far Rockaway is getting City Ticket. Those Far Rockaway will be able to purchase it both at stations in the Far Rockaway station itself and on train time. But you will not be able to buy it, for instance, in Jamaica or at another station. It is only going to be available there because, as you know, Far Rockaway line is one that goes through Nassau before it comes back into city limits. So they want to make sure that it's dealt with properly. One really good piece of good news is that the fare capping on Omni, which is a great deal and which gives you the benefit of a weekly without laying out the cost of a weekly, but now it's only Monday through Sunday. It's going to become a rolling fare cap because not everybody travels that way. So when the fare increase happens, whenever that will be, Omni's fare capping will begin on the day you first start using it, whether it's a Wednesday, a Friday, a Sunday, whatever. So that's a really good piece of news. As far as time continues to go down, but there are some highly publicized incidents taking place, some pushing. It's just some really irrational behavior going on. We're happy to see police more and more throughout the system, but I would just give the same advice I would give someone whether you're in the street or in the subway. Just be aware of who's around you and make sure you stand back. There is a test, basically, a new gate that's in the middle of the platform at the 57th Street F-line station. If you have a chance, go and look at that. If people are happy with what that is, that's something you can hang on to or be on one side of if you know the train is coming in one direction and you want to be shielded. This is something that can be installed in many locations. So if you have a chance, go to the 57th Street F station and take a look at that. But overall, crime is down, which continues to be good news. And I'll just stop there, Jerry.
I have a question.
Sure.
So with the Atlantic ticket, does the authority share any numbers with us in terms of, you know, if they don't go with the transfers, how many people would be impacted?
They haven't shared that, and I'm guessing, and it was ratified by somebody, and I can't remember who, because I've talked to so many people about this, but since the schedule change and the lack of through service to Atlantic Terminal, like there used to be, there are less people using the service. There is additional service from what it was prior, and ridership is definitely up, but the number of people utilizing that ticket may not be.
And then, what would our position be?
Because I think now, basically, the West Hempstead is the only line that continues to, like, you can get a train, where you used to get a
Yeah,
Brooklyn
the
train on
West
track
Hempstead
3,
train.
and the West Hempstead, like hourly during the day.
Can I add something to that? One of the points that we've raised, though, is that you can only get an Atlantic ticket at a ticket vending machine or window. So you can't buy it on your app,
Not on track time.
which is what will decrease the availability of it. You have to, you know,
Even
run.
further, so,
Yeah.
so what's our position, meaning, because if they want to tie it to city tickets, have they said what the cost of adding that privilege for all people who use the city ticket would be? Is that the reluctance, you know what I'm saying? Meaning Rockaway riders, if you were adding the Atlantic ticket to the city ticket, are they envisioning the revenue loss?
They think there's a revenue loss from the offering of the weekly option with the free transfer to the subway and bus, not the conversion to city ticket per se.
Right, but that option, they estimate.
They have not given a dollar figure.
So are we taking a position whether we're okay with it melding together?
We have said, both of us, at various meetings, that we don't have a problem, because it will end some confusion, to have it all city ticket, but we have said we do not want to see the weekly option lost. In fact, we said we think it should be expanded to all city tickets, whether you're riding from Wakefield, Williamsbridge, or St. Albans.
And that's our position.
That's our position. Karen?
Two things. One, they still have the off-peak ticket on the app, and when you go to the vending machine, as opposed to just city ticket, they haven't taken that off. And two, with the rolling fare cap on the Omni, what would it be for the monthly?
They haven't told us about a monthly yet. I keep pushing for the monthly option, and the fact that they want to convert everybody to Omni, and they're going to continue to have a monthly ticket, tells me that they know they have to convert to a monthly fare.
Yeah. Because the reason I asked that, I'm just curious that maybe if the numbers are right, it might end up kind of being similar-ish to the weekly.
Similar-ish is a good word.
So I just want to add that, you know, we have, seen what is potentially laid out. We know that there will be some public hearings, but we don't know what is actually being proposed, because there's still an opportunity for public comment. The public comment period will be in June, at the end of June. The dates haven't been publicly released yet. And the board meeting where where this will be voted on is, in July 17th and 19th.
And everything that's going to either be offered or done away with or changed must be in the public notice.
Right, so there must be in the public notice. So, we don't know today we know what we've heard. We don't know what is. So, what probably makes the most sense, and we'll talk about a fair policy recommendation, not on a specific level of, on the specific level of, here's some recommendations in a bigger picture, but not at the drill down level of, here's the recommendations, let's vote on them as PCAC, or individual councils, because we don't know what's going to be recommended. And that's it probably that makes the most sense once we see what those recommendations are, or what the proposals are, the policy proposals are, to discuss them at the council level, and maybe convene an emergency meeting of PCAC virtually or however to, which we can probably do, we'll figure that out, but to then discuss and then take either individual council positions or PCAC positions. But right now, we know speculatively and not actually. And we will testify, and we'll ask you all to testify as well.
Hello,
Yeah.
yeah. Isn't, Lisa, today is June 1st. Isn't there some kind, okay, just in case nobody noticed. But isn't there some kind of a time frame that has to be met when the notice of the public hearing is, and what's in it and everything else? And and if this is going to be at the July 17th board meeting, it seems, I seem to remember that there has to be like a 2-week or a 10-day or something notice. So, what are they waiting for, is my question.
One of our special guests today is John McCarthy, and hopefully he will, be able to discuss this as well. I don't know when they're gonna announce the date, but I would imagine it's gonna be soon, because
Doesn't it have to, I guess what I'm saying is it
I don't
doesn't
know
have
what,
to be.
I think that they have to announce within 2 weeks, in a 2-week window.
Yeah, before the, right,
Yeah.
they will have that set up.
Definitely do that.
They will definitely have that before the 2 weeks are up. Yes, Mr. X.
This general place, which we created, is going to be public hearings this month in preparation for the July board meeting, which is like question of marriage. I think it's predecessor, I think we did in the past, I know it's predecessor did. Is there any particular why they can't wait? Is there any way they have to hold public hearings in 1 month and then decide the following month as if they're rushing the marriage?
Yes, because, they need to go into effect in September so that they can balance the budget. And that they need to have that waiting period. And I think everybody, at least everybody here, would really hope that there's no August meeting, although you never know.
It's
Possible.
It's
It is
possible.
possible. But they actually changed the date of the July board meeting so that they could take the vote on it in the time frame allotted. So it's to balance the budget.
Well, that's to allow everybody to
Right.
switch over so that they can have the fare increase in September. That's why they moved the
Right.
July meeting up a week.
So we have our, Jeremy is on the line. We have our presentation at 12:30. It's 12:27. I am gonna, basically give Randy's report with
Okay.
one major focal point. So Randy,
Different voice.
I can do that, but,
No, thank you.
and Randy is not available to join us today, but he, sends his regards and regrets. So his report, is available. He talks on it about new train schedules that will go into effect on the Hudson, Harlem, New Haven lines. Some shutdowns, and, the trip on, train 728 that includes, that included the, a really nice ride on a train. Walter, you were probably with him. But this, I have copies of the report for anybody who would like to know more information, but I really want to focus on, and I apologize for not having more information on that, something that was raised at the board meeting in May, which was potential cuts to, the New Haven line, and the shoreline.
Shoreline East.
Shoreline East by the state of Connecticut in their budget. And $38 million, which would potentially eliminate on the New Haven line, go from 309 trains daily to 260 trains daily. That would include both peak and off-peak trains.
But while Metro North continues to say the New Haven line is their busiest line,
That's right. And not only that, but while the state of New York has committed to not cutting service. So there's a disconnect while, it's the budget dance in Connecticut is continuing. But and New York and the MTA are working with their counterparts at Connecticut DOT to try and figure it out how to keep these cuts in this, and these issues from being raised. But there's still, a very real possibility that there could be some financial cuts, and that the MTA is not in a position to pick up the slack on that. So the Connecticut Commuter Rail Council has been very vocal. The Metro North Railroad conductors, the Acre Union, Edward Valente is the head of that, been very vocal, and we're working with both of them to voice our concern and our displeasure with those potentials. And I will like to confab with the Westchester, with our representatives on Metro North at later, or at some point to get your thoughts on how we can work more closely to align and make sure that the Westchester County Executive understands the issues, the concerns, and is open to speaking to his counterparts in Connecticut.
Well, to make things even a little more difficult, is if they eliminate Connecticut trains, we have an obligation to the governor not to cut service for New York State residents, and that line runs through, so, I mean, you'll have people in New Rochelle. Yeah, you'll have people in New
But the
Rochelle.
yard is in Stamford.
Yeah, so it's kind of crazy.
If I may, very quickly, because I said this and you can look at the Transit Riders Council, but I happen to have some contacts with various Connecticut elected officials in my other life, and they have assured me, and I'm not going to mention any names, but they're people who you would know the names, and that this is part of the negotiations. One of them said to me, just like you were futzing around with your New York budget and canceling and not canceling and doing what, but this person, one of these people just said, we realize that this is something that is just as necessary for Connecticut residents as it is for New York residents and back and forth. And I was basically assured that this was just all the game playing that goes on during budget negotiations, but nothing drastic will happen at all. So I just want to share this.
Thank you.
Well, I want to share this with all of you.
In New York, we'll play the game in Connecticut.
Yeah, no, well, they are playing the game in Connecticut right now.
The price is right.
Okay, due to the,
Interestingly, they keep saying that CT Rail, the line that they funded from New Haven up to Hartford, that would not see any cuts.
okay, we're gonna hold off on the executive director's report due to time constraints. So, we have Jeremy here, so we'd like to proceed with the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Payment Evasion Task Force.
Okay, Jeremy, and now, how do I share this? Hold on, we're gonna share this. Yep, you do, thank you. Hold on, technical difficulties. Technosaur, right, is that what we said?
That's me. I'm the
I
technosaur.
stole it from you.
I didn't know it was contagious.
Yes.
Okay, if someone could just pop that into slideshow mode, that'd be great.
Yeah, I didn't realize.
It's loading, it's a little bit, so if you want to give a preview to the preview.
Yeah, sure. While it's loading, I'll start. Hi, everybody. Sorry not to be there in person, offsite today. The Blue Ribbon Panel report came out just 2 weeks ago now, and we are now in the stage of just kind of broadcasting it to the public and externally and internally, beginning the long, hard work of actually implementing the recommendations that Lisa and her colleagues on the panel came up with. So I'm going to depend on you, Lisa, or someone else in the room to advance the slides, I guess. And if we could just tick ahead. I'm just going to give a very high level preview here and hopefully leave a healthy amount of time for some conversation. First, just to introduce you to the panel, and there's 16 of them, so it's 2 slides. Lisa certainly needs no introduction. The group as a whole, I'll just say, was absolutely just terrific in every way. Just the range of backgrounds people brought to this: transit expertise, social justice, criminal justice. We had former prosecutors and a former judge, RPA and Transit Tech Lab representation, and community organizers like Joanne Yu. So just a really great mix of expertise. And fun fact, the group was all transit users and very enthusiastic transit users. And the very first meeting, we actually had people introduce themselves not by, oh, I'm the CEO of this or that, but I ride this or that bus line or subway or train. And we got some great conversations going. People found out that they were neighbors and use the same bus or subway, et cetera. So just a great group, and they worked very hard. They did a lot of work. As I said at the press conference when this was announced, this was the hardest working Blue Ribbon panel in show business. They went out in the field. They dug into the data. They really spent significant amounts of personal time and energy on this, and I think the work product shows it. So if we could tick ahead, the first order of business for the panel was just to document, how bad is this problem. These are the numbers that you could see. This is a public presentation. It's on metrics.mta.info, which is the beta site where the MTA is now publishing a lot of performance data on a regular basis, not just a fare evasion page. It's got a ton of information about the railroads, bus, subway, et cetera. But you'll see there's a fare evasion tab for buses and one for subways on that page. And these are the numbers you would see there. So, what story are these lines telling us? Basically, sharp arc up, from left to right. And at the left, you see pre-pandemic levels, which, were not terrific on the buses to begin with, but they've now jumped to almost 40% from in the neighborhood of 15 to 20. There's a little break in the middle there, representing a period where buses were fare-free for COVID safety. And on the subways, the line is going in the same direction. Pre-pandemic rates, in the range of sort of 3-4%, now bordering on 14. The other thing I think you can pull from just the visual of these lines is that those pre-pandemic increases are sticking, and even as ridership goes up. So you've all seen some of the encouraging recent numbers on paid ridership, but even as ridership goes up, the evasion rate is staying disturbingly high, and that tells you that this is a change in behavior and not just sort of subtracting paid ridership from pre-pandemic levels. So if we could tick ahead, one of the other things the panel focused on was to look across the entire system. This has historically been thought of kind of in the popular conversation as just a subway problem, but here's another way of looking at the bus problem. There's pictures in the report, all these pictures are. Just to show you the magnitude of the problem on the buses, maybe in a way that a line graph doesn't convey. And then if we can move forward one slide, please. The same sort of presentation for the subways. Subway ridership is also coming back, but the evasion rate is sticking, and 400,000 people a day is the estimate. So we can go forward one more slide, please. And the panel is very careful to look at the entire MTA system, look at commuter rail too. We don't have a vivid picture of a person fare evading on commuter rail, but what this image does tell you is the problem is on commuter rail, it's subtler. The fare evader on commuter rail is as likely as not, is just keeping their phone in their pocket. And they've got a valid ticket on their phone. They're simply not activating it and hoping the conductor will miss them, or if the conductor does come by, they'll pretend to have a problem with their phone, or they'll run off and hide in the restroom. There's all sorts of evasive behavior going on commuter rail. And if we can go forward. And this, there's a video here. I don't know, it's always dicey on Zoom, but if whoever's controlling the slides could, at the bottom of the picture, if you hover the mouse there, there should be, you should get opportunity to play the video, and hopefully people can hear. No, looks like we lost it. Well, let's just go ahead. What you would hear if we could hear Officer Vasquez is that's one of our MTA bridge and tunnel officers showing a fake temporary New Jersey license plate, which he had just taken off a car crossing the Verrazano Bridge. This is a huge problem with people using fake plates and blocking legitimate plates so that our license plate readers can't read them. And you'll see there's a lot of content, a lot of data in the report about the bridges and tunnels, which I think is kind of a new thing in the public conversation when people talk about evasion, but hugely important because bridge and tunnel toll revenue actually goes to support buses, subways, and commuter rail in large measure. So we can go ahead. Sorry about the video, but let's skip ahead one slide. No problem. It rarely works on Zoom. We gave it a go. if we can jump ahead. Okay, so now this is sort of reducing it to the bottom line impact, and look at that red number there. That's a record. The last number MTA published started with a 5. We're now approaching 700 million. And that's how we're talking about it now, is just, round numbers. This is a $700 million loss to the bottom line, which is just enormous. And on the right, you see the extent to which we're depending on fare box and toll revenue as slices of the budget pie. Not news to this group, but just highlighting it. And certainly we're trying to drive this home in the public conversation. Key point being that with all the chatter out there about free transit, we're going to pilot 5 free bus lines. But balancing the MTA budget going forward depends very, very heavily on the ability to actually collect fares and tolls, continue charging them, actually collecting them. So again, trying to drive that in the public discussion as well. We can jump ahead one slide, please. And while we're waiting for the slides to advance, just highlighting that buses at the top, that's also a first time thing. Subways, because the ridership is so much higher, historically has been the biggest contributor to the evasion loss. But with almost 40% of people not paying on buses, even with lower ridership, the loss to evasion, a cash loss on buses, is now the highest of any mode in the MTA system. And you see that for commuter rail, we've got 44 million bridges and tunnels together, and commuter rail make about 90. So we could take ahead one slide.
We need to do a little imagination here of unsharing our internet connection.
Okay, I'm still seeing the, okay, there we go. I'm sorry, back one. Yeah, there we go. The panel also reviewed a lot of public commentary on fare evasion. These are just excerpts and comments that people put into the MTA customer care channels. And there are hundreds of them. And these are people choosing to talk about it. It's not something the MTA prompts, hey, what do you think about fare evasion? It's something the MTA constantly hears from paying riders about it. It's incredibly frustrating to people who are paying the fare, and especially, I was able to hear some of your conversation about the fare increase, and that heightens the intensity of these feelings. Not only am I paying, and I see other people not, but now you want me to pay more, and I'm effectively subsidizing the fare evader. Drives people crazy, and the panel really highlights that in the report. At the same time, if we can take forward one slide, it's not about pitting the rider who can afford to pay against the rider who truly can't. Panel met with low-income riders, met with members of the Riders Alliance, and really heard very vividly that people who are not paying for economic reasons are struggling with it. It doesn't feel good. They'd like to be paying riders. It makes them feel more like New Yorkers. They get it. The paying is everybody's obligation. But they told us stories about literally standing at a turnstile or a fare gate and kind of doing the mental math about whether they could afford to pay the fare that day or whether they needed the money for some other life essential. I'm not sure if we're having trouble advancing again, but if we could jump forward one, okay. I think we sort of covered that, except to emphasize fair fares is a major focus of the report. And we also heard from riders, the panel did, that when they had the fair fare subsidy for bus and subway, that it was incredibly helpful, and it made the difference for them in that mental math. Yes, I can afford to pay the fare if it's at 50%, but if it's 100%, I feel like I almost have to evade. Let's jump forward one, please, if we could. So here is just a picture to kind of show you how the panel's approach differs from the way fare evasion's usually been approached. With thanks, I guess, to the New York Post, et cetera. If you ask the average person, fare evasion, just do it as sort of a word association game. You'll get back turnstile jumping, teenagers jumping turnstiles in subways. In fact, Roger Maldonado, who's our panel co-chair, when we asked him to join the panel, he said, "Oh, that's what this is about, right?" And Roger then sort of led the charge in showing the world just how big and broad the problem really is. And the old solution was, well, how many police officers can you put at how many fare gates? And for a million reasons, that approach just sort of the panel concluded is no longer tenable as the sort of the heart of the response. So you see on the right the 2023 and future approach, which is what the panel calls the 4 E's, using education, messaging to the public, special attention to K-12 students in the 5 boroughs, environment, that's we're using design and technology to reduce evasion. Equity means in large part the Fair Fares program and seeing how it can be made bigger and better. And yes, continuing with enforcement, very, very strong commitment to continuing the police and criminal justice response to this, but trying to target it in new ways that are going to be more equitable, that are geographically distributed, that hit all communities and all kinds of fare evaders, and there are all kinds of people fare evading. So let's jump ahead one, if we could. The report, by the way, it's up on mta.info. If you just Google MTA Blue Ribbon, you'll go right there. For those who haven't seen it, we gave Lisa some hard copies. We're in the process of printing more, and we'll get more to you as we get more. But I hope people can really take time with it. The panel spent a great deal of time on it, put a lot of thought and care into it, and there's a lot of important content, I think, in the document. So when you have time, please, give it a go if you can. But for now, let's just pick out, what this slide does is pick out some of the most important recommendations from the 70 plus that the panel has put out to the public. On the student front, just want to highlight that there's a recommendation. Students, K-12 students in the city currently get 3 free rides on a Metro card. Physical Metro card. And the recommendation here is first to do everything the MTA can to move those kids over to Omni as fast as possible. One of the reasons why student cards drive fare evasion is because the cards change hands. They're quote unquote lost, or they're sold, or they're stolen, or the kid gives them to mom or grandma. Put the rides on the phones, and only the kids are going to use them because they'll never let go of their phones. So that's a key recommendation. And we heard directly from high school students that 3 rides simply wasn't enough for kids who have after-school jobs, after-school activities, who have things to do around the city on weekends. And so there's a recommendation that if we can get this funded, to move that from 3 to 5. And the funding package for student rides has been woefully insufficient from the MTA's perspective. Basically, MTA's been carrying this, subsidizing this program almost entirely on its own for many years. On the equity front, people have probably seen there's a lot of discussion right now about increasing fare fares from eligibility, doubling it. It's currently at 100% of the federal poverty level, which is $25,000 for a family of 4. And that's just a crazy low number for New York City. It's a national number, it's a federal number. So poverty is defined the same way in the South Dakota and the South Bronx, and that just makes no sense. So the panel has gotten behind a charge led by Speaker Adams at the City Council. David Jones is a member of the panel and member of the MTA board, to double that and have the city budget commit to fund that at a 200% eligibility level, which would by various estimates, could add between 500,000 and 1 million lower income and working class New Yorkers to the Fair Fares subsidy. Fair Fares also just hasn't reached the people it's meant to reach. It's always been undersubscribed and even underused by the people who enroll in it. So a lot of work underway, thanks to the panel by the MTA and the city, to just get more people enrolled and to make it easier to enroll and to encourage people to use the card once they have it. On the environment front, hopefully y'all saw when the press conference releasing the report happened, focus on what the next generation of subway fare gate might look like, the tall swinging plexi doors. A key driver here of the thinking is, first, just make it harder to evade and you'll reduce evasion. You don't have to, criminalize it if it doesn't happen at all. The priority should be to get people actually paying the fare. And these next generation fare gates, the panel thought would help to do that, in particular because they help you move away from the slam gate. And there's data in the report that the panel gathered, which is published for the first time, showing that the subway slam gate represents north of 50% of subway fare evasion. One more reason we shouldn't be talking about turnstile jumping anymore. We should be talking about gate walking, because that's the heart of the matter, and everybody's doing it. Stand in a subway station for 30 minutes. I guarantee you will see every kind of New Yorker walking through that gate, elegantly dressed, less elegantly dressed, every demographic. It's insane. And also moving on the environment front towards equipping all of our people, including the Eagle teams on the buses, with handhelds that will allow them to do proof of payment checks. And as we move away from MetroCard and toward Omni, we can move towards a world where basically any place in the bus or subway system, you might be met by an MTA civilian security employee who would just point a device at your device and say, show me how you paid today. And you get a thank you or a summons, depending on what the device shows. And on the enforcement front, we're already at north of 90%, 95% enforcement being handled in the civil system. And the panel applauds that and suggests that it should continue with a couple of tweaks, important tweaks. One is to add a documented warning for first offenders. The second is at the Transit Adjudication Bureau to add some options that don't exist today, especially for lower income riders, where the first, if you pay your fine, you'd actually get a portion of it back on a preloaded Omni card. Again, there's that theme, let's make people paying customers. The report uses the phrase customers, not criminals. Another reform that's proposed for the tab is to give the hearing officer the chance to say, look, if your defense is you genuinely couldn't afford to pay, I'll suspend your case for 30 days. You go sign up for fair fares, come back, show me that you did it, and we'll waive your fine. Again, trying at every turn to drive people into the mindset of becoming a paying customer. Criminal enforcement, as I said, very much still a focus, but let's target it. You'll see the phrase precision policing in the report. What does that mean? It means using data to find out where evasion is worst, and MTA is getting better and better at that. We have an ability now that we didn't have 2, 3, 5 years ago to measure by bus route, by subway station, and actually find the hot spots so we can deploy enforcement in a targeted way. And we worked very hard with the DAs to get them on board, and they all joined in the press release, commending the report and committing to the report's recommendations. There's a definite intersection between people who fare evade and people who commit more serious crimes, and the DAs are committed to going after that group. We also asked the DAs to focus on what we call the evasion enablers. These are, for example, the people who vandalize the MetroCard machines and then run fare collection scams at the slam gates. The bridges and tunnels. These are the people who sell and profit off of the gizmos that block the license plates. And the panel also asked the DAs to consider criminal enforcement for people who just evade and evade and evade, who are caught, 5 times enough that should, there still is room for misdemeanor prosecution in the panel's view for people who are simply fare evading, constantly. So those are really the key points. And if we can jump ahead, I'm just about done here. I just want to show you a couple more pictures. So this is a rendering that's in the report of what Hudson Yards, kind of our template station, might look like with the new equipment. A couple of things just to highlight. You see the tall swinging motorized plexiglass doors. You tap your Omni, the doors swing open, you go. You see the ADA versions of those gates at the left. One nice feature of this technology is you can mix and match and put the ADA gates anywhere in the fare array, including in the middle, getting away from that notion that the person in the wheelchair is always shunted off to the side. So a nice combination. Somebody tweeted after the report came out, solve one problem, fare evasion, and you solve another, accessibility. And that's an important consideration when you think about this next generation of fare gates. And where you see those tall plexi panels at left and right, that's where the slam gates would be today, and slam gates are gone. With the right kind of work with the fire authorities, these doors function as emergency egress as well as ingress. They simply fail open in the case of an emergency. You can jump ahead one slide, please. Another fun fact, this is a picture from the press event where we had some of the prototypes up at Grand Central, and If you look at the caption, that's a New York Post reporter who decided he was going to prove that these fare gates were vulnerable to evasion. The reporter wound up on his rear end, which was.
Show the next picture. Underground, yeah.
It seemed like maybe piling on to show that one. So
There's no such thing as going on.
I think it would only be turnabout.
leave that to everybody's imagination. I see in the chat, by the way, a comment that fare gates like this have been in use in overseas systems for many years, and that's true. I will say that the focus here is first, I think they are just now coming to the U.S. SEPTA, BART, other systems, WMATA are just beginning to pilot these. So is the U.S. A little bit behind? Absolutely, but we're there now. I think is the good news, and also we're talking about modern version of these. What you wouldn't have 20 years ago is overhead sensors that assess who is coming, that can actually adjust the behavior of the doors to target, to make them harder to enter if someone's trying to piggyback, for example. There are very sophisticated devices that have all sorts of customer benefits in addition to being harder to evade. So would it have been good to do these years ago? Absolutely. Is it even better to do them now with modern technology? The panel thought so. Jumping ahead, what I think is our last picture. Here, I'm not going to even try with the video, but this is just to show you that it's not all about billion-dollar capital expense and replacing everything across 472 subway stations. This is just an example of something the panel talks about, which the MTA has already begun on a very limited basis to experiment with. I don't know if someone wants to try and play that. The picture on the right is a video. Essentially what this is, it's something called delayed egress locking. You basically just put a time lock on the slam gate, and it didn't work. Well, I'll narrate it for you. What you would see if the video were playing is that woman approaching, trying to exit through the slam gate. The gate is locked, and rather than wait the 15 seconds, she just immediately diverts and exits through the turnstile, which is what she's supposed to do in the first place, because she doesn't have any, mobility restrictions. She's not carrying a suitcase or pushing a stroller. No reason to use the slam gate, and she just goes whoosh over to the left. And so again, a lot of work to do with fire code authorities to expand the pilot on this and to measure the impact and to be sure we're attending to accessibility and other considerations. But just an example of a small, low cost, almost immediate intervention that we're optimistic could reduce subway evasion. And there's lots of examples of that, which you're going to begin to see in the near term. There's the motorized door slam gates. You will see them today in Atlantic Barclays and Sutphin Avenue, where we have our wide area gate pilot in progress. That's an accessibility initiative, not a fare evasion initiative, but it is our first experiment with the motorized doors, and we're very excited about it. So jumping ahead, just to highlight, there is a public comment portal, and we encourage you to use it or to direct others to it. And we're beginning to get a lot of public feedback on the report, some of it very positive and thoughtful, and some of it, people being grumpy, but that's New York. Anyway, so there is a ton of work to do. I guess the main thing I'd just leave you with is that our commitment, MTA's commitment to Lisa and the other 15 panelists, is this is not going to sit on the shelf. There is a ton of internal work already underway to tick through each and every recommendation, assess the feasibility, implement it, pilot it where we can. Strong emphasis on running pilots, measuring outcomes. Our system is so big, we want to find out what really works before we build solutions out to scale. So you'll see reference in the report to a fifth E, which is to experiment, and we're going to do that. I'll leave it there, and hopefully there's time, Lisa, for some conversation.
I want to add, Jeremy, thank you so much, that there are recommendations as well for the commuter rail that look specifically at some that are unique to the commuter rail. So we have our Metro North and Long Island Railroad Council here today as well. So don't feel left out, because we know that's an issue too. And saying that also because Larry has his hand up, and I also want to say we're running a little shy on time. So, and John is here, and we want to be respectful of him. So we had spoken earlier about having member,
Yeah, we'll just have them.
conversation, and then having anybody who is not a member and has a question or comment to send them to us, and we will address them as we can. So I know Larry's had his hand up, if you would like to.
And I have my hand up too.
He's got his hand up.
No, I know, I just asked him.
Okay. I'm gonna unshare though, because we are first there. That's it.
Great.
Okay, Larry, on?
Yep, I'm here. No,
right,
this may be a really, this could be a really, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
Larry.
Okay, this could be a really weird question, but you said that the fair evasion is at 14%. How do you measure a fair evader when they're not logged into the system, so to speak? So how do you get these metrics and how do you get these measurements?
It is different for each mode, Larry. I would say that for, let's start bridge and tunnel, because that's probably the easiest. That's math. You know, we can count every car, you know, going past the gantry, and we can count the number that pay and the number that don't. So, you know, subtract that, and you get for bridge and tunnel a fair evasion rate in the range of 5-6%. But because the tolls are high, the cash loss to evasion is very high. We also have a separate category, what we call persistent toll violators, who receive bills by mail and don't pay them. Those aren't, strictly speaking, counted as evaders, but you know, economically, the impact is kind of the same. Buses also very much math. We have counters on the buses, which we can tell at any given time how many people are on a bus, and we can tell how many people on the bus paid. Subtract one from the other, and you get to your evasion number for that bus. Multiply that out across the system, and you get your rate for the system. For subways, we depend on human checkers. And the panel detailed the methodologies in the report because there has been public question about this over the years and wanted to sort of dispel any concern that the methodologies are less than reliable. The subway methodology was sort of rebuilt within the past couple of years with pro bono help from a data science expert at Columbia. And it depends on human checkers who go out on a regular basis. They're sort of randomized across the system. They count, and then you know it's sort of sorted, and there's an algorithm involved that builds out from their findings to a system-wide rate. We also have computer technology in place at a very small number of stations, which measures evasion, and we get a hard count there. That's not an estimate. And while it's a small sample size, it comes out in roughly the same place as the very extensive system of human checkers. Commuter rail, it probably has the least robust system, and one of the strong recommendations of the panel for commuter rail is to start with, you know, really kicking the tires on that very hard and seeing how that can be done better. We have our internal audit team go out and just ride the railroads a couple hundred times a month, and they see if their ticket is collected. That's essentially how it's done. And there's you know, lots of reason to think that we could find build a better mousetrap on that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Jerry?
Can you mount the hand up?
I'm.
All right, go ahead.
First, I do want to think about. I was looking at the book online because it's easier to find. I'm glad to see you mentioning accessibility. I do thank you mentioning, wheelchairs and walkers. I guess regarding the gate you mentioned about Atlantic Avenue, it looks good, but I hope in the nearest more future, if we're working on the gates, we need to make sure that those gates are really not just strong, but when you're tapping your Omni or your MetroCard right now, because we are doing that both at the same time, we need to make sure that no one is pulling or trying not to break those gates. So far, they have not done in Atlantic, but I'm seeing that in Jamaica. And right now, that's a little more of the issues that's going on. And if we're going to be talking about fair fares, we also need to remind we have to reduce fare as well, because we have seniors and people with disabilities that definitely uses that in that part. And as it's breaking the law needs to have to be public comments, I know it's going to be a lot we have to put in our comments into the public, but we definitely need to work with more with seniors and people with disability. And I know Debbie's putting in her comments into the chat, and I know that's going to be shared to everyone. But at the same time, we definitely need to deal with very much with the seniors and disability community more strongly, because they're getting more harassed. when they do pay the fare, and they don't like these people getting pushed. So we definitely need to work on that as well. I'm glad to see we're working on the other customers, but some of those gates, we need to make sure that wheelchairs and walkers have the right to go in and on when they pay the fare. Thank you.
Sure.
And
So,
Jeremy, I think you see Debbie's question about,
Yeah.
representing the district.
Yeah. A few things here. Let me try and take them one by one. So first, the pilots that are in progress right now at Atlantic Barclays and such, and we are watching very closely what the usage numbers look like, what the payment rates look like, what the evasion numbers look like. I've been out myself just to do some field observation and watch how customers interact with those gates. Our accessibility team is driving that initiative, and they're all over it. We are very mindful of the sort of push-pull risk and the breakage risk. One of the considerations that's being looked at right now is whether we can increase the resistance on the doors. There are settings, and you can basically dial it up, dial it down, but you have to get permission from fire code authorities, and you make certain adjustments. So we're looking at that. We're also looking at a second generation of that pilot, where potentially the doors could be taller, harder to jump under, harder to crawl under, to jump or to climb over. So, in due course, I'm sure we'll be releasing, updates to the public once we have more of a critical mass of data on all of that. There's a question about are there members of the panel who themselves, have disability issues? To my knowledge, no. We didn't have any wheelchair users on the panel. I don't, we didn't, question panel members about, other mobility restrictions they might have. I will say that there was tremendous buy-in across the entire MTA for the work of the panel. I'd say front and center and all that was our accessibility team, Q Arroyo, Rachel Cohen, Suri Groscott in transit. They were absolutely essential to kind of feeding data to the panel, helping the panel think this through and be sure that the right balance was struck here. You could lock up the system and make it impossible to get through, or make it very difficult to get through, but the disabled customer, would be the most severely impacted. So there's I'd commend to you, there's a note, you look for sort of green boxes in the report, you see sort of sidebars. And one of them is about, I think the headline is a balanced response. And there's a detailed discussion there about the need to not just, tighten up for the sake of tightening up against evasion, but they always have to be assessing the impact on our customers with disabilities as well.
And I just would like to add, I was on the panel, and if you think that I don't hear everything that happens at all of the meetings, I take it back and incorporate it, I absolutely do.
No, I didn't say that.
Everything that, all the issues that you raised and that Deborah raised and that are raised at the, not just the ACTA meetings, but the Long Meadow Dimension North, disability meetings.
Oh, no, I understand what you're saying, I agree with you saying, Lisa.
Take those and bring them and brought them into consideration.
And, Lisa, just to be, for the record, I didn't say that, I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I'm just want to be, that some information, I'm just backing up what you're saying.
Absolutely.
And I do appreciate what you did.
Just to know that there, even though I don't have a disability, I certainly.
No, you do represent us, and I do appreciate it, so I want to be clear for the record that Lisa does an excellent job.
All right, Karen and Sharon, and then we're gonna go on to Ms. McCarthy's.
I appreciate the presentation, and three things I noted during the presentation. One was you said to expand fair, and in addition to the enrollment, making the actual process easier. It's a little bit convoluted, and that could be a barrier to expansion. I would say two, and this is more for the commuter rail, maybe incorporating the purchase and the activation instead of it being a set process when you're using the card for the same day. I think that would eliminate a lot of those issues. And then the third part is, I'm not quite sure how the MTA is going to deal with active, like people who jump the turnstile even when the police are there, because the police do not respond to them. And also, I have seen some of the altercations on the railroad where I kind of even worry for the conductor's life, where some of the people can be very aggressive. So I do know that for those who are very forceful about breaking the fare, that there has to be something that happens. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but when it goes unattended, they're emboldened and they continue.
Yeah, let me tick through this very quickly. I'll go in reverse order. Absolutely agree. The panel strongly would agree with you about the need for enforcement to be increased. This is not just a social justice approach, it's a combination approach. The panel says, I think this is a quote, that enforcement needs to be firmer and fairer. And in particular, where there is violence against an MTA employee, that would be priority one, I think, in everybody's view. And we've had cases recently, where commuter rail conductors, have been attacked, by people who didn't pay the fare. I was in court myself the other day to watch, someone plead guilty who had, produced a knife when they were asked to produce a ticket. So the very strong commitment from the panel across the MTA to see those cases attended to. And the DAs were great about this. When we talked to them, they said, absolutely, bring us those cases. We care about them. We will prioritize them. On commuter rail and activation, I'm just going to refer to the report here. As Lisa says, there are detailed recommendations regarding commuter rail. A lot of them are around this problem of delayed activation and how to deal with it. A lot of attention's been paid to that. In the interest of time, I'm just going to encourage people to look at what the report has to say about that. And last thing on fair fares, the issue with expanded usage, and we talked a lot on behalf of the panel, we went out and met with the Department of Social Services, that why aren't people using this incredible benefit more? And they did some survey work at our request, talked to people who are enrolled or who are eligible but not enrolled. One thing we heard a lot was that people who are not enrolling or not using are simply not working or are not working in capacities that require them to commute. They might be working hyper locally, for example, or doing work inside the home. So one of the main benefits of this expansion from 100% of the poverty level to 200% is you begin to tap into a much larger working population where people are going to have the kinds of jobs that require bus and subway travel. So very optimistic that the 200% increase, if it goes through, would kind of create a whole new group of paying riders.
Jeremy, it's John. I just want to jump in on one of the items that you raised about the safety conductors. New police chief, or not new now, it's probably in a year, Chief John Muller, the chief of the Yonkers PD. He's been very good about and is one of the big channel levers pushing on it part of getting more patrols on the train and more nimble availability of the police officers, not necessarily at outlying stations as much as we're driving around in cars, but they're on the train, and then when they're on the train, walking through the train. Sometimes it's very helpful to the conductor and the onboard staff if folks on the train, and maybe someone who's going to give a hard time has already seen an officer walk through, they might think twice. So that is helping, and my experience with the conductors are pleased with that.
Question, is there someone there that's supposed to tell the passengers that there's a policeman on the train? I've heard that a couple times.
Well, there's a difference between the railroad and the
subway. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm talking about the railroads, but
okay.
but that's certainly a good idea to do it for the railroads as well. We do it for the subways now. It's a sort of a joint venture with the New York City Department, and by all accounts, it's working well. I think people feel a greater sense of safety, certainly with officers. But now,
yeah, but they also know there's one on the train.
Yeah, they know they're being told that they're there. They're being told that there's amplify the work that they're already doing. So that's helpful.
Sharon,
I'm speaking up for the schleppers. I very often have to open the damn slam gates because I have luggage or things I'm hauling around. It's hard to tell from the picture if they are wide enough for people to get. The current turnstiles aren't wide enough.
Yeah, the new one,
that much wider.
with the gates,
The double one.
the double ones are, and there would be more. Some, and Jerry, I'm sorry if I'm answering your question, but there were 3 or 4 different models on display. I found one of them to be kind of narrow, and the other ones to be for more like New Yorkers who like our pretzels and hot dogs.
Thank you, Lisa.
If
Yeah.
can you use the just the handicapped? Is that an alternative?
Yeah, so if you go to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, Jeremy, the one at Sutton where we had the wide
Yeah.
aisle. Yeah, at Atlantic,
Yeah.
people are using it, whether they are using a wheelchair or they have, certainly at Sutton, they have a ton of luggage and people are using it.
Yeah, exactly. We chose Sutphen specifically because as one of the 2 pilot locations for the wide area gates, because it's a transfer point for people coming to and from JFK, and we're seeing huge adoption of the gate, the WAG, by people who have luggage but no apparent disability.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Okay.
At this point,
Thank
we're
you.
gonna.
And we'll if it's okay if we post the video, with the actual, your presentation with the actual video, because particularly that last slide, the people stopping at the 15-second thing and going through the Iron Maiden is really a very telling argument.
Yeah.
Actually, I think Debbie and me will definitely agree because on that too.
Okay, all right, thank you so much.
Okay, very welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, thanks. And we're gonna bring, John, we're gonna bring a camera to you, so you don't have to get up.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it depends if everybody can hear. Let's
Yeah,
make sure.
there's microphones right here.
Can you move it, Michelle?
I'm on the Mac. I'm in the Mac, but,
Okay.
they all heard him earlier when he spoke.
Close to that chair right there.
Yeah, that's fine. I don't bite.
Oh.
I don't bite.
All right.
She had to run. I'm safe.
Here.
Okay.
All right, Lisa,
We have John McCarthy.
thanks for having me.
Thank you.
So Lisa asked, or do you, can I just jump in? Is that okay?
Jump.
So, Lisa asked, from headquarters, to come by. I just, want to take a lot of questions and have a conversation, but I just want to hit on a couple of themes. First, I really want to thank all the work that you do, because what we achieved in Albany could not have been achieved without you. And I mean that sincerely. It is, and you've probably heard Jana Lieber and others talk about this. Advocacy for transit in this incredible, and it's worthy of the need for transit, and it's what helps us get things done. So what happened in Albany this past session and getting a budget that really put the riders first, Governor Hochul led with a plan, and that was put in place. So, I think everybody who takes transit for granted, a kid who grew up not driving, most of my family doesn't drive, it's just like everything we say about transit being like air and water, it's very real. So just to take you back in time, a year ago, when we saw that we were facing this fiscal cliff, and I'm sorry about that for some of you, but when we were facing this fiscal cliff, our CFO, Kevin Willens, working with the CEO, Jana Lieber, put together a plan that led with, we have to make the case. And just go and ask or shake a cup and go to Albany. We have to make the case why transit should be funded. And a lot of work went into that. Put together a plan. We visited, we talked to anybody who would listen. And we were very fortunate that we had leadership in Albany in the House and in the Chamber with Governor Hochul that understood the importance of transit. All the case that we made. And what came out of it? Well, we came out with a plan that closed that gap. It was made possible really also with other advocates like the partnership, which understood the importance of transit and knew that sometimes you have to turn the dial a little bit on some taxes that will make this possible. That happened. City contribution, And then very importantly, I think, is the MTA taking a very serious look at itself and making sure that we're doing our part. And that doesn't mean reducing service. That doesn't mean reducing jobs. It means doing things better, more efficiently. We should always be doing that. We are, but this is a deeper dive, putting really smart people into a place where they have the tools to dig down into the organization and find opportunities for savings. We made a major commitment for it. So what does this all mean? This means that we can preserve the service that we've been providing, which, by the way, is very strong. You've heard Rich Davey and Catherine Rinaldi talk about the service levels of it. It also allows us to grow service, which I think everybody here is very excited about, particularly on the weekends and some of the later evenings. And so it also allowed us, allows us to move forward with labor negotiations. And so we're in a much better place than we were a year ago, and I just want to say how grateful we are. But I think it also sort of captures what we're trying to do here, and I think you're all part of that, which is tackle big issues that are confronting both the city, the region, and transit, because we're all interconnected. And if you look now back at the track record over the last year and a half, you see a lot of big things in the topics. Our focus, getting ridership to return. We saw Tuesday records on the Long Island Railroad, right, Jerry, and Metro North is also hitting records. We've had over 200,000 riders, I think something like 40 times since Grand Central Mass. Yesterday we had, shy of 4 million, but we've hit 4 million on the subways a number of times in recent years. We're well on buses. So our ridership is returning. A big part of that is public safety. There's been a focus on public safety. A lot of the work Jeremy's doing, and Lisa, part of that important panel. But there's a lot more being done with public safety, working very closely with the NYPD to make sure that people are comfortable. See it in the crime. Earlier this year, I think it was in January, we had 1 week where the crimes per million passengers was lower than we've seen in many years. Another week, but overall for the year it's down. And people notice that. It's what makes them feel comfortable. Opening Grand Central Madison, that was really tough to do. Got it done, right? It was many years in the works, but, just sprinting to the finish line. Fiscal cliff, which I mentioned, advancing congestion pricing, that's something that somebody would have said, don't even bother. It's a lot of hard work, heavy lifting. You're going to make, enemies. People are going to be upset. But it's incredibly important for decongesting our streets, getting our buses moving, and also for better quality. The ADA settlement, huge. This is like, we always, internally, and you might hear us talk about this, but we want people to see the same map when they look at a transit map, and we have a special map for accessible stations. It's not the same map. We want that to be closer.
Yes.
We have tinted agreement with TW100 that came, through last night. Again, that's only possible because of the work in Albany and governor and the legislature. And I just, two big projects that, like, sometimes we talk about finishing third track, but what's our next big project that's ongoing right now? We haven't talked about a lot of station access. That's already, people are doing work, and that's adding 4 stations to the Bronx, commuter rail to the Bronx. And that's important because a lot of what we're doing on the commuter rail is captured in that project, which is adding service to communities that are underserved by public transit, particularly for trains in the city. And what kind of work does that include beyond station access? It's like an important one is city tickets. Making it more attractive for people. There is capacity available. We want to use this service if it's closer to your house. There's a lot going on, a lot to be excited about. There's, but you're only as good as your last thing you did, so we're going to continue to move forward. But the top line is that this is an effort that involves elected officials, but so importantly involves advocacy. And I saw this. We did the Riders Alliance did a little bit. A couple of Fridays ago, it was a beautiful spring day. celebrating the advance in congestion pricing and that, you know, a lot of elected officials from Manhattan and beyond. So it's very exciting that people feel very engaged and they're very involved and very much a part of everything. So that, Lisa, I will, you know, maybe I can take some questions or we can dialogue or Andrew.
And we'll do another event when the final Fonzie comes through.
Yes.
The Fonzie? Oh.
Yes. Fonzie.
Hey.
Yay, there you go. That's the Fonzie we think of, but the Fonzie that it is the happy day, right, in a way?
Bad pun.
Sorry.
Bad pun.
So, it's a 30-day period for the final EA that started on June the 12th, so from May the 12th, it'll run through June the 12th. And so we remain very hopeful that from there, we'll get our final funding, which is a finding of no significant impact. And, you know, at that point, then we move on through the TMRP process, which is that board, which is dedicated with the job of really coming up with a pricing plan that they would then go to the TETA board, which is the EFTA board, and where they would come with their recommendations. So, you know, they have a lot of work in front of them. Staff will certainly help, and from there, you know, you have to build out, and hopefully, if all goes well, you have go live next quarter of 4. And you know, the important thing on the Central Business District Tolling Program is, you know, it's decongesting the streets, safety, better for the environment, and then it's going to fund data good repair work and a capital program that's already been voted on, and you know, it's a big part. So we're hopeful.
Does any of the PCAC members have a question? Trudy?
Hey, John, hi. Well, just to go on the record, one of the initial ideas for compression pricing and everything else started with this group it's now at least 7 or 8 years ago, and stemmed from conversations with Sam Schwartz.
Sure.
And so I guess for the record, I want us, the group, to really get some credit. That said, you've just given a wonderful calendar for when it might happen, but there are so many obstacles, especially the various lawsuits, the various objections from some people, not people here, but areas represented in Newsroom, Westchester,
Sure.
Rockland, et cetera. So if you could give some idea of how you think that's going to be handled and what that would do with the calendar, which is wonderful that you laid out that kind of a calendar.
Thanks, Drew. Look, in any environmental review, there's always the potential for litigation, and as you do go through that process, it's why the team, and as they should be, we're very focused on getting this right. Of course, you're concerned about litigation, avoid litigation, and you want to be prepared for litigation. But we also understood that this is very much a model, and it was sort of put forward as a model for other localities who are dealing with congested areas. It's not going to be as large as New York City, but I don't know what other municipalities might be dealing. It might be seasonal, it might be a smaller area in their downtown. But so there's a lot of eyes on this. So yes, I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know what the litigation could be, but we're prepared, and we are interested in making sure that we can move forward. We'll deal with whatever comes our way, but we want to stay on schedule. So that's as much as I have on that right now, Drew, but we're aware.
As long as you keep in touch and let us.
Yeah.
Well, you know you do. I shouldn't even say that.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. And then there was another question I brought up, which they told me to bring up, about the about the timing for the hearings on the fare hikes and what's going on, and in terms of whether there are timeframes that if you're going to be voting, or we were told that you were going to be, that the board would be voting on this at its July meeting, July 17th or something, and that has to be preceded by the public hearings, and the public hearings have to be preceded by, so if you could give us by the actual posting of the.
Yeah, so I would anticipate that we should have out in the next, very short order, a schedule for hearings. We'll do hearings here at 2 Broadway, and we'll allow for in-person and remote, which is a little different, but I think it's working really well. And we'll have sufficient hearings, and we'll do that probably, I think we have a certain amount of notice that we have to get, so it'll be later this month, but it will be in time to capture those hearings. They'll be at different times of the day so that people, can fit it into their schedule, and then that will wrap up prior to the July meeting where the board will take the
action.
Take action.
And is it still the case that the fare hikes will go into effect right after Labor Day? If all goes well?
Yeah, I think it's by the or that period. I don't know that it's after Labor Day. We haven't worked out that schedule.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, so it would be August or
Okay. Yeah. First, I wanted to thank you. When you guys bring this up at the board, you do break it down. I thank you very much. I'm just gonna be like reminding and maybe saying this every year for a century. When we do the proposal of the fare hike, I'm glad we're showing percentage and what's the proposal, but can we also put the reduced fare information out too? Because I'm speaking for the low-income families, and I know Edith has mentioned this in the past, but she yells, but I'm not going to yell because I'm not going to be like that. Because it will help the future customers who have to adjust their Social Security, their Medicaid insurance, so they know that what they have to prepare in the first of the month. Therefore, they can, warn the state or federal that the fare's going up. How am I supposed to do? I have to adjust my budget.
Yeah. Okay, that's noted. I put a note, and I understand that point. And which raises, and I don't. Jeremy talked about it a little bit before, but just on that discount, the fares. I can't say enough. We need more people enrolled, more eligible, and more people eligible. Meaning not going one way, but that means increasing the eligibility.
And extending it to commuter rail.
Exactly, and also just to let you know, once you become after 65, it does not work for the seniors who are also low income as well.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying because it needs to be, I know Lisa's been doing an excellent job, but just want to let you know that it does relate to that. But when people sign up for the reduced fare, they're actually enjoying it more because it's easy to get the card at a customer center, like a temporary card. But for fares right now, if their car gets damaged or it's a limited time card, they have to wait 4 weeks for another card. We have a better way of getting that car faster, more reliable there as well.
Okay.
And with the congestion price, and I hope we do talk about reduced fare prices or deals, because the news has not mentioned that. Like, if a person's going from Staten Island, and Julie, I know you're going to say, let me just finish my sentence. We just need better communication, so how can we back you guys up, and how can we be supportive? But if the press is giving the wrong information, they're going to jump all over us.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we're on the same page. Yeah. I don't have a problem with the congestion prices because sooner or later we need that money to make sure more accessible elevators, ramps, and any station to be truly accessible. And that's what I've been saying even since then. Thank you.
But just to finish up, and then this side of the table, I hope will not. No, but what Chris was saying, speaking for, I never thought I was to this day, but I'm glad I did, speaking for the elderly and people who are living on, basically on fixed incomes and Social Security and Medicare, et cetera. I think it is very important, because I get this all the time. They know that there's an old lady sitting on the board. But that it should be made clear, not just for people with disabilities, but anybody who is on a half fare. I got it yesterday while I was waiting for a bus for 22 minutes, but that's another story in the evening. But from a woman who was waiting with me, and she said, "You seem to know your way around. Maybe you can tell me or find out who I can talk to." So I told her who I was, and she said, "Oh, that's good. I'm glad we're waiting for the bus." So this is a positive. But I will tell you that especially, and rather than saying elderly, well, people on fixed incomes are the ones who really, really, need to have this kind of consideration, and especially what's going on or not going on with Social Security, et cetera. So if that could be noted in any announcements that are put out, translating it to not just what the fare is, or if you go with Omni, or if you buy a fixed number or anything, but literally breaking it down into dollar amounts.
Yeah. Okay.
All right. I think that was well laid out.
Okay.
I think Andrew Kurzweil has a question.
Okay, I have a question about a pesky little line that I think is in the middle of trying to get rid of, and that is the quote-unquote, you want to call it discussion money, of the leftover money from the pay. The excess money.
Oh, this is like if somebody.
The excess, right.
Yeah, so, from time to time, I know this well, and now it's not one of those times, but this is basically money that's on cards that have either expired or soon to be expired. Sometimes the tourists might come into town and have $10 and they leave.
The unused money.
Yeah, and a lot of it sometimes is change, like, because it's, the fare. So I don't know what the latest is on that. I know that people can get their money back. One of the things that we've done is try to take Stone Street out, and that's why the customers enter. So we're trying to do things that can take care of people who are immediately trying to consolidate cards to life.
That wasn't kind of what I was asking so much. It's more basically, what's going to happen with that money? With the transition and everything.
We'll have to get back to you. I know it's something that's being thought.
Because I know it's a pot of money.
Yeah.
And I know you can't touch it, but you have to put it on your book.
We have to keep it on our book.
We need.
That's why I'm asking you.
Okay, we need to move on with the program,
Yeah,
folks.
no, but I appreciate, I understand the question, and we don't have that answer yet.
If you have any further questions, please submit them to Lisa. Lisa, what's the email address?
mail@pcac.org.
And we'll get back to you. Okay, so.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. We greatly appreciate you
Thanks,
stopping by.
Thanks so much.
Trudy, thanks so much.
Appreciate your time. Lisa, did you want to?
I do, but, I do. So, we have next a presentation on, a draft fare policy report that Kara and Ryan have worked very hard on and sent out to you. But first, I would like to announce that Kara and Ryan graduated, where they got their master's degree on Tuesday.
Don't you mean our car is grown up?
Show some before you go, with that cupcake. To celebrate the occasion, we have cupcakes for everyone who's here. And sorry about it.
Here's your
We haven't figured out how to do it yet.
That's good smell-o-vision, smell-o-vision.
You guys get there's two kinds of gluten-free and another one, so we'll put them over here. So congratulations, you guys, very well deserved, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I want to say thank you to Lisa.
But you have to pay attention to the presentation.
And we do have a worksheet if anyone needs it.
Yes.
And just for the record, I got it on the email.
Yes, so we sent around the draft fair policy recommendation.
No, I have it.
Thank you. We haven't had a chance to read them in depth yet. We have copies here for everyone, or you can get back to us after the meeting.
share.
Excuse me, Cara, does the public can look at this, or
We're gonna share a presentation on the screen, so
just want to make sure?
moment.
Okay. Just asking. And I apologize for the interruption, but I just had to ask.
Okay, thank you.
No, this is all public, this is a public meeting, this is.
No, I have an extra copy, someone who is sitting there.
Oh, yeah, as long as it's an extra copy.
Thank you, Jared. No, I appreciate it. Let's go Mets, or let's go Yankees.
We'll send that at 7 o'clock,
So, we sent around the draft fair policy recommendations. We've spoken in multiple councils before, in PCAC generally, about how two railroads, the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, have similar but also very different fare policy and fare structures. For example, sometimes on the two railroads, there's different criteria for when senior or disabled discounts can apply, different criteria for peak and off-peak, and various other eligibility criteria that do not align. And so we wanted to do a pretty in-depth analysis and recommendations on how to better streamline and harmonize the two railroads' fare policy and better integrate that across the board with New York City Transit as well. So we're going to go through some of our draft recommendations that we'd love your feedback on. First, we noticed that the existing fare structure is very complex with dozens of ticket options. Ryan did a lot of work and figured out that there's approximately 30 different ticket types on the two railroads available between, I think, Woodside and Jamaica, and there are just dozens of different kinds of tickets that are open to people, which makes it very confusing, not just for riders themselves, but also for conductors and ticket collectors, and even for the MTA itself, when trying to streamline these different ticket options. The fare options also differ between the two railroads, and the fare structure is not fully integrated with New York City Transit, at least until Omni is fully rolled out. And so simplifying and unifying the fare structure will create a better transit experience for everyone, riders, workers, and the MTA all together. We've heard from conductors on both lines that riders get confused, that ticket takers get confused, that it causes conflict, and we've already heard about conflict.
So we divided up the recommendations into pre-Omni rollout to the railroads and post-Omni rollout to the railroads, because there's a lot of things that could be done in the shorter term before full Omni rollout, but there are also many things that can be better integrated once Omni is rolled out system-wide in terms of integration. So Ryan is going to walk us through some of the draft recommendations in the short term before full Omni rollout.
Yeah, so in the shorter term, just before there's a new fare media and as we sort of begin the on-ramp towards the transition, there's a couple points that we want to cover that the railroads can take care of earlier on that would make a lot of ground. So for the first case, rationalized ticket types and discounts. Every ticket needs to have a real use case behind it. Having 29 different ticket types between 2 points that are about 4 miles away from each other doesn't make a very good argument for why you need to have that amount of choice. And the thing is that these choices don't clearly communicate their discounts and eligibility. So that would mean clearly communicating in a percentage basis or in the amount of money that you save by buying a weekly or a monthly, by how many rides you have to take in a month in order for your, in order for your particular trip to actually save you money if you're buying the monthly. To communicate where users will save the best amount of money, most amount of money, and where not. Additionally, and we have a couple maps for this too, moving towards a common price per mile figure on the Long Island Railroad and Metro North, plus a unified city zone. We're seeing the beginning of this with the introduction of City Ticket, the beginning of a kind of city zone of a use of commuter rails within the 5 boroughs, sort of differently than they are in the suburbs. But one thing that would also help in the suburbs would be a common price per mile figure, whereby the zones for both railroads could work together. There's currently 4. We'll get to that. Another one, expanding fare fares, including eligibility for people below 200% of the federal poverty line, like on transit, moving it out to commuter railroads. Furthermore, expanding City Ticket to include a weekly option with transfers. Now, talking about rationalizing ticket types, you have Atlantic Ticket, you have City Ticket. They're very similar things, and they have 2, one's only offered on fare machines, and the other is offered on fare machines and phones. You have, there's an asymmetrical amount of information that's given to the people buying tickets, so someone who only uses a phone isn't going to know about the Atlantic Ticket because it wouldn't be available on that app unless they went by at a ticket machine. So, expanding City Ticket to include a weekly option, to include a transfer fare to NYC Transit, would help unify the 2 programs, number 1, and number 2, work towards rationalizing ticket types by creating a ticket with the...
Not to play devil's advocate,
Go
but
ahead.
I can see where management might say, if we were to offer that, what would stop reams of people from driving from Valley Stream to Rosedale, Great Neck to Little Neck? I'm just, Mount Vernon to Woodlawn. I mean, I'm just wondering, and buying the thing and saving a fortune over their current monthly commutation or weekly commutation.
They won't be able to park.
And
So they'll get dropped off.
Andrew, that's the same kind of argument that's being used about against congestion pricing, where that will stop it. You can't, it's human nature, and you just announced it in advance that once you got everything in place, that there will be penalties or will be looked upon with them. But could I just ask the question?
Trudy, before you do that, one of the things that was brought up by elected officials who represent the Co-op City area was, when Penn Access starts and there's a station at Co-op City, what's to stop tons of people from New Rochelle, Pelham, Mount Vernon from driving there and then taking the train? So it's even on elected officials.
No, it's constantly being brought up.
It is. So that's, that's going to be a consideration, but there's going to have to be a way to deal with it.
Yeah, there has to be.
So,
Could I get back to something else that you said, where you're talking about some tickets being available online, some being available in person, et cetera, and I admit that I'm a Luddite, so that I'm asking this question from the vantage point. But with all the new advancements, isn't there some way of putting all these things together so that all tickets are available online, on a machine, in person?
That is an excellent question, and that's the one we're asking the MTA.
Yes.
Actually, that's our proposal.
Yes.
Clearinghouse.
Well, you mean we haven't asked the question yet?
We ask it every day.
And do we get any kind of an answer?
Yeah, but let them finish their presentation, and then let's sort of answer questions then, because we are running out of time here.
Yes, once again, just to breeze through it, so offering through tickets between railroads at an incentivized price for inner suburbs and for destinations within the city that would require a transfer. Sometimes with the current combo ticket situation, you actually might save more money if you just buy the 2 tickets separately, and you also don't have a time limited like a monthly or a weekly option. You'd have to keep buying your round trips every day. And then finally, and this is probably a little understated, but information, sharing ticketing and scheduling information. We have an excellent train time app that takes open source information through feeds issued by these railroads. It can be integrated with further railroads in the future. So you might be able to see, say, NJ Transit or Amtrak times on your phone from the train time app if you could incorporate those feeds, which are in the same format. Slide, please. So here's what I've been talking about, though. This is more the broader aspect. This is currently the fare zone map for the region. I did not include the west of Hudson lines because they are priced according to NJ Transit's model, where there's a slightly different price for each station. But right now, you have 4 separate, completely different fare logics with different prices per mile, shared by MTA's railroads. There are 3 held by Metro North, and then 1 from Long Island Railroad. They're similar in price based on difference coming from the city center. But again, there are a lot of exceptions to them. But at the end of the day, you'll notice that it's a very disjointed system that dates back to the orders of private companies that preceded the MTA's railroads. So this is a pretty old, legacy system. And so what we're proposing is, and this is just a sketch map. On the next slide is there we go. Yeah, on the next slide, so what would it look like if New York had its own concentric fare system? Now, of course, we can't include New Jersey in it, so it's not like the fine onion you get on a map of London. But if there would be a sort of common price per mile, it would be a lot easier to put together a system whereby there's a common fare zone, whether or not you're in Westchester, Long Island, or Rockland. You can say, I'm in zone 8, I'm in zone 9, and you understand what you're getting at there. And one of the other important things that I want to point out is if you look at the 5 boroughs, they're all in one zone. An expanded city ticket program with a subway connection would effectively make the city flat fare zone within the 5 boroughs, allowing for that sort of allowing for a formalization of like, this is the city ticket zone. Instead of what are the city ticket conditions, you're able to see 5 boroughs, city ticket. Simple as.
Is this all still before Omni?
Yep.
And
Yes.
so getting to post-Omni, there's a few things that having one common fare payment system can do for riders in the railroad itself. One very important thing we want to emphasize is the MTA should continue to work with labor, riders, advocates, experts, and other stakeholders who are involved in the railroads to look at ways that Omni can help modernize and improve ticket collection. That includes the recommendations of the Blue Ribbon Panel report. And also evaluating Omni's potential to allow for off-board ticket validation and other opportunities to essentially modernize the way that tickets are collected with stakeholder input, of course, and also broadening Omni to introduce some kind of unified, comprehensive city ticket and other discount options such as pay-as-you-go, fare capping like they do on New York City Transit, maybe through Trudy, as you were just mentioning, some kind of technology to potentially help merge the train time app with your Omni account, and really looking at the ways that Omni can better join together and integrate our fare structure as a whole.
One of the reasons that Omni is delayed for the commuter rails is PCAC has to work on the programming. The programming has become a bit of an issue for certain fare types and everything, and they've got to get through all of that, obviously.
As long as Andrew interrupted, I was going to wait till you were through, but I follow my leader. Anyway, no, can you continue? You say we've been asking that question about integrating everything. Have you gotten any kind of an answer at all?
We have, but it's a long answer, so let us.
Well, can you abbreviate it, because
they say that that the ticket machines are old, that it's very difficult to program them, that it's a pilot program, that they can't do it.
They can't or won't?
Yes.
Yes.
It's frustrating because they can when they want to, and they don't when they don't.
I mean, they've used old machines and old systems for other things.
We know.
Do you have any problem if I sue through some people that
I think that, it's.
Because it's so aggravating to hear this.
It's aggravating to live it, absolutely, but let's see what happens with the fares, and the changes. And if Atlantic Ticket is rolled into City Ticket and the ticket type comes out the way we would like it to, then, it can all be on e-tics, and then life is wonderful. So, you know, we.
But that's just for one specific kind of ticket, but I'm talking about in general, you know, with.
Well, I'd say, let's poke the bear once we know what we're poking, what we're poking them for.
But we know we got a big bear there.
That's a big bear.
Yeah, let's continue with the presentation.
Okay.
And just finally emphasizing that the blue, as Jeremy had presented earlier, the Blue Ribbon Panel report did find that a lot of the issue on the railroads is rooted in the very complex fare structure. And so I'd encourage anyone who hasn't read it yet to take a look at that, and we recommend that many of those recommendations be implemented as appropriate with stakeholder input, of course. And we love all of your input and further discussion.
I'd like to see one thing added. It's just been burr under my saddle for a number of years. The senior discount on rush hour. It's good in the morning and not at night, or vice versa.
Vice versa. And
But it's crazy. It should be consistent. It's either good, it should be good for both rush hours. Why is there a difference between one rush hour and the other? It makes absolutely no sense.
Agree.
If you're
So
rational.
we
It's
spoke with,
irrational, exactly.
so
It's irrational.
we actually had a meeting with the MTA fair folks on that. And, the response was that the federal government funds, travel for reduced fare,
Thank you.
but only during off-peak travel. So the MTA pays for the travel during peak, but they didn't fund it during the morning peak because there's a BC before COVID. Because there was a standard peak period in the morning. And but we're concerned about being overrun with it, you know, with people who were traveling at a set time. And in the evening commute, it was just sort of a much larger period of time when people travel. So we'd asked, what would it cost to extend the discount into the morning peak? And, we haven't gotten an answer yet. That's something we need to follow up on and pursue. We've asked it a few times, and we'll need to get an answer. So,
Again, the response you got, like, the policy is totally irrational.
right.
There's a 4-hour rush hour in the morning, there's a 4-hour rush hour in the evening. They're the same, you know, so for them trying to tell you one is different from the other, it's BS. I mean, they all the
I
same.
think it was based on crowding, but, you know,
It's the same people go in, have to come home at night. It doesn't make logical sense.
I agree with you,
So
Jerry.
here's a suggestion I would make. You know, as the board is making its recommendations for fare changes in a couple of months, and as we are doing our testimony, making our recommendations, something we should include.
Yes, that's why I'm bringing it up now. I think it's something we definitely
And I
want to.
said to Jerry on this, because it's a serious matter for disability, because I had mentioned this years ago. Yes,
Yeah.
Andrew, I did.
Stuart has.
Wait, I had a question. Not a question, I just.
Stuart and Walter.
All right, yes. Stuart?
Hi, Jerry, thanks. So, you know, we brought this up before, the differences in the hours at other meetings. But I have a question, I don't know the answer. When we talk about fares, that's one term, but when you look at the actual language, they use the word tariff and setting a tariff. So is there any law that maybe we're not aware of that would prohibit certain changes or equalization, whether it's federal, state, no?
So Walter has
In
a lot of
establishing
experience,
tariffs,
Walter has
yeah.
a lot of experience in that. So the only thing that might have an effect is Title VI, and making sure that, making changes to one, group doesn't have a negative, you can't exclude another group, in making those changes. But I know Walter has done this before in his world.
Yeah, I've never excluded another group.
Well,
Well, I was just gonna mention, on Metro North, we have an outbound peak in the morning,
yes, we have.
and the LIRR, I don't believe, has that.
Correct.
And the reason why we put that in was, back when I was doing what I used to do there was a big reverse commute on Metro North to Stamford, Rye, some as far as Bridgeport, White Plains is another big one. And so, the people, we actually put some additional trains on to handle that outbound peak, in the morning. And so our people felt, well, we put additional trains on, we're running a lot of course, these folks should pay the same, peak hour fare as the inbound people pay. So that was the rationale behind that.
Yep. So we raised that, and Stuart, we'll look into the difference between tariffs and fares. I know about the Title VI issue, and I know that if there's going to be a change, it has to go through the process that, has been outlined for these changes and
Exactly.
and the like. We raised the issue of, all right, so can you just, you have outbound peak fares on one railroad and not on the other. We were told, well, in order to rationalize it, we would just have to put a peak outbound fare on the Long Island Railroad too. Like, well, that's not what we're asking
But
for.
obviously, the Long Island Railroad is aware of it because one of the benefits of third track that they keep hyping is reverse peak.
Right, right. So, I think that it's a matter of time, but it doesn't need to be something that we recommend.
No, definitely not. Well,
Yeah,
that's one thing.
rationalizing is yes, adding is not.
But can I add something I'd like to compliment? Because looking at this, even off on the computer in here, I have to say you guys did, as a draft, did an excellent job.
Thank you.
And I want to say this for a reason, because we know we don't have to mention, reduced fare because reduced fare is already on the railroads and it's already on the subway. But, I think if we're gonna mention fares, we just need to be clear. Some people might ask this question is because the people don't know the difference between fares and reduced fare. We just need to keep that explained to them. That's two different teeth.
Fares is funded by the city.
Thank
The recommendations are pulled out of a report that's gonna be shared with you also.
Yes.
But these are the recommendations that we wanted to make sure that you all see if you have any questions and are okay with. And Mike, you look like you have a question.
Yeah, two thoughts, thank you, there's a lot of great information and data in here. I feel like it would benefit a lot from an overall mission statement. There's a lot of conflicting reasons for these different things, and I think pulling it all together in a clear statement up front would be helpful. And just, looking at the map, I understand the attractiveness of a common per mile fare. I don't know what problem we're trying to solve with that. And I'd like to know if we're gonna push for it.
Thank you, Timur.
What's the problem? Because basically, the railroads are sort of like operating as one now. You have, interline fares. We want to get, it's under one management. So we feel that the price per mile should be similar. It's a similar service. Why should one be way higher?
Not necessarily though, right? I mean, your travel time is not based on your mileage necessarily. Travel time is not higher. If you're looking for something that actually impacts their lives.
Are you saying that then you think that if the ride is quicker on one line, the price should be higher than on another line? Or?
Not necessarily. I'm just saying if we're going to rip up this system, which is a massive undertaking, I'd like to know what the problem we're trying to solve is. And do we think that riders? I don't know what the existing per mile fare translates to, and there's an implication in here that's different on the two railroads. I'm not sure which railroad is favored and which is discriminated against. But I'd like to know what problem we're solving. There are a lot of other things that are really good and really clear benefits to riders in here that I'd prioritize over that.
So there is a larger report that we'll share with you also that has more of a mission statement and context and case studies, and shows why it makes sense in looking at the broader picture and compares it to other systems as well. So we'll share that to you. We wanted to get this to you first. We have sort of a little dark history, the PCAC, of having reports that go there to die, and we don't want that to happen because these guys worked really hard on it, and this is the time, given the fair conversation that's happening now.
Yeah, and
Now, this is not a question, just a comment, very quick comment, because I brought it up with John before. I would request that when we talk about half fare, reduced fares, and say that it's for people with disabilities, that there is one phrase that is used in many different contexts, and I would hope that we would use it too. And that's why I'm going on record as requesting it, that we talk about people on fixed incomes. That takes seniors, that takes people with disabilities,
Veterans.
that takes people with low income generally, or 200% below. It takes care of everything, and it's not just my phrase, that it's used in many other contexts, and I would request, unless people have an objection, that as we write our reports and on our suggestions and everything, that we use that term rather than breaking down who are, who gets a lower fare, a half fare, et cetera.
It's all based on eligibility. So if you're on a fixed income, that's $120,000 a year, that doesn't mean that you're eligible.
Basically, Lisa, this is a term that is universally used.
I don't know that it's, I don't know.
I am telling you this. I am telling you this from my own experience, from other things I'm involved with right now, that is the universal term, because it doesn't exclude anybody who may not be a senior citizen or may not have a disability, but for some other reason. So unless you can find some objection from.
We'll find it.
But I am putting in that request basically on the record.
Do you have something? Yes. I'd just like to thank the staff for the work they've done on this. Very constructive work. One of the points you made at the beginning of the written material that I pulled off the computer this morning, one of the objectives should be to offer passengers the best value for their ride as the first option. And I would love to see the machines programmed that way, so that when somebody comes in and they want to go from here to there, it's now 11 o'clock in the morning, the machine will tell them what's the cheapest ticket to buy to make this trip. Because I see people in the stations request for these machines, trying to dope them out, not the regular commuters, but for the unusual, occasional riders.
What's not peak?
Yeah, and there's what time is the peak and all of this stuff. And if the machines could be programmed that way to give you the cheapest option for your trip, that would be wonderful.
Yep.
So, do we still have clerks that sell tickets?
Yeah. In some places, not everywhere.
Yeah, not everywhere, though.
They don't know what they do. They know what they're doing?
Not always.
Allegedly.
You're on their cell phone.
Allegedly.
So,
Patrolman.
just for some background, I, at several railroad terminals and stations around the region, I just kind of stood at the ticket machine and just kind of clicked through it, got images of the interface. There's a couple things coming in the full report that include just flowcharts, like what does the screen show and what decisions you can make. They're very old, they're at end of life at this point. They're held together with the software equivalent of duct tape and baling wire. And so moving on to Omni, they would be moving on to Omni, and to your point, and also to the point that about like activation of tickets. Omni offers the opportunity, at least with its contactless ability to do off-board activation of tickets. So I have a monthly, even though I have a monthly on the Train Time app, I have to activate it every time before I board. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I forget most of the time because it's a monthly and you expect it to be active the whole time. I haven't gotten the email yet, but, technically I'm not following the rules of the monthly ticket, by that standard. If it could be automatically activated off board using contactless technology, that would be a thing of the past. But another thing too would be, the thing of the past. Yeah, we'd move past it.
Well, the reason you don't have it on the monthly is because they know they've got you.
Right.
With a single rider, if they don't get you, they can use it again, where your month's gonna end and that's it. So they got you coming and going, so that's why you didn't get the
Walter, we agree with the
Monthly
machine
for,
programming.
is it months
Yes.
rather than a 30-day period?
No,
Oh, my God,
calendar month.
I'll pick up your monthly
Okay.
today.
It is 10 after 2.
Yep, all right. I don't think we have any old business. I don't think we have any new business unless someone's got something.
Jerry, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Oh,
Second.
no, we missed Lisa's. Lisa, do you have any highlights for executive?
Oh, I apologize.
This is my highlight. Congratulations.
Thanks.
We will reach out to you regarding information about, next steps on congestion pricing, because there will be public, there will be, when the Fonzie comes out, but also regarding their hearings when those proposals come out, so stay tuned. And, we're in the process of going through resumes to hire for our vacancies, and, it's one of the most strange trips it's been, so that continues.
And now I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah.
Cancel that.
Lisa, you'll keep us in the loop as far as New Haven.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you guys, separately and talk to you about that. Okay.
Okay.
Once again, Jerry, you made a motion,
I seconded
Trudy
it.
seconded, and discussion.
All right, now,